But yeah, I mean, today, as Jean said, I'm just gonna it's not gonna be super formal, but I'm gonna talk through what we can call like generally de-escalation practices, but are more so a set of general rules of thumb that I kind of want us to get comfortable with regards to how to like handle different types of situations, whether it's like conflict, whether it's you know, inside the community, people sometimes have disagreements, sometimes there's conflict, but also like externally that can come up every once in a while, and it's like, you know, in general shouldn't be a huge problem, but it's good with these types of things to just feel a little bit comfortable, feel prepared. You can't make yourself not feel stressed if it's a stressful situation, but you can prepare yourself for like how you'd want to handle it, how to react, or even most importantly, like just how to be aware of yourself before you're engaging with it, right? So the way I kind of alluded to it, but the way we can categorize it is kind of like I said. There's some things that are within the community type conflict, and some that are like external conflict. There are things that apply to both of them, but the way you might navigate handling them is a little bit different. So the reason I divide them is, and like kind of also within that, like knowing how you want to approach the conversation, but also importantly, like, is this a situation that's like antagonistic, like the person is being aggressive, the person is being rude or disrespectful, something like that, right? That is something you would handle in a particular way as compared to like, people have good intentions, they mean well, but there can be disagreements, there can be misunderstandings. So you want to approach those slightly differently. But regardless of the situation, the kind of general things to keep in mind that apply to all things that you really want to think about is kind of, first of all, assessing yourself and your positionality, right? Whenever you engage in things like, you know, to be honest with you, like sometimes based on your positionality, you might not be like, feel comfortable being the one to de-escalate a situation. That's okay, it's important to know that. On the flip side, you might be down, but you might not always be the best person for it. You know, understanding power dynamics. This doesn't really apply to folks in this particular way, but you know, sometimes like being a big, tall, white dude, you're not the best person for de-escalating a situation. And so that doesn't mean you have to immediately remove yourself, but it's good to assess yourself first, right? How am I feeling about this? How would I contribute to the situation? And so that's the first thing, is like understand your positionality, right? And then kind of moving from there, things that apply no matter what the conflict situation is that you want to be aware of are body language and your communication style, right? In general, if we have to summarize, you never want to make someone feel boxed in, you never want to make them feel like you're trapping them or like keeping them confined, right? Because even if it isn't a super escalated situation, it can stress people out and make it more tense, right? So, you know, don't go like corner someone in a space or make them feel that way. These are a little wishy-washy, but you kind of like, think about your body language, right? You don't want to look really aggressive, even if it's a high intensity situation. If you're coming in like arms crossed, pointing at people, yelling at people, like that can only lead to sort of higher level like intensity than it needs to be, right? So these are like the body language aspects, right? Giving people a sense of a way out, right? Because oftentimes that's the best thing, right? De-escalating is like people walk away, people cool off, and you can get back to it when people are ready. So if that's where you're trying to get, you don't want to be boxing people, and you don't want to make it harder, you don't want to seem like they're not allowed to leave or they're not allowed to take themselves out of the situation, right? In communication style, the most important thing is like genuinely listen to what's going on. You don't always have to inherently validate things, like sometimes someone's just being aggro, but genuinely hear it out, like understand the situation. That tends to like help de-escalate a lot, even if someone's coming in with a bad attitude, like if they feel like you're genuinely just like, okay, like what's going on, like want to get it out, you know, these are important things, right? Versus coming in, speaking in a way that's accusatory or like aggressive on your end, right? So combining awareness of body language and communication is important, right? And so while I might maybe list a few different types of tactics for different situations that can be good to keep in your mind, things have to be flexible, right? Things, you have to really like feel out the situation. And so a lot of these tools are good, but just generally things about self-awareness and trying to genuinely understand the situation. Like if you don't know what else to do, that's what you gotta do, because that's gonna help kind of guide you through it, right? Yeah. So the more obvious one is that kind of external type of conflict, right? So the cafe is a welcoming and open space, right? But at the same time, we are prioritizing serving a particular community, right? It's especially like people who are marginalized by other spaces, right? Students in this area, folks who don't have access to things, right? As easily. These are the communities that we want to prioritize feeling comfortable. So everyone is welcome, but we need to know who the space is most in need of serving, right? So sometimes, and this could be well-meaning, people come by, you know, maybe they just are curious, maybe they are demanding, and again, can mean well, but the easiest thing to do is, again, like, follow through, right? Assess your personal positionality, right? And then kind of go forward with it. Really hear them out. Be like, oh, like, can I help you? Like, what's going on, right? Whether it's some community member, you know, there are some rich churchgoers who are like, what's all this? Why are all these kids here? Like, what's going on? You know, maybe it's a houseless person, maybe it's some faculty, could be anything. Just go like see what they're looking for. Sometimes they're just curious and you can just tell them. You just be like, this is what the cafe is, what it's about, you know, have a nice day, right? Sometimes they're like a little pushy and trying to get annoying, so you know, that might come about. And so the biggest thing after you kind of hear out what's going on, these are not super aggressive, but they're just like it's something that you'll need to handle. It's like, you know, hear them out, give them the spiel, and then redirect them. And honestly, don't overthink it. You can be honest about the fact that, like, oh, this is primarily for like students and community members. So like, we don't want to deny people like access to food and support, but like also we don't have the means to just give food, or like we don't have shelter. That's not a thing that we currently have. We don't have a place for people to sleep, and it's really bad that there are so many houseless folks in the community. But we also have to be real with like what can we actually provide service to, and what we can do. And so it's okay to be upfront with the fact like, I'm sorry, we're not a shelter, or I'm sorry, this food is primarily for students. And especially again, if it's like the faculty, and like faculty can buy their own food. There is a faculty center right there. So you don't have to be rude to them, you don't have to be dismissive to them, but you can just be like, this is the community that we're like intending to serve right now. And so usually that's fine. And then they're like, oh, okay, like do you know where I can use the bathroom or water? And then you can just give them the info and they move along. In some cases, you know, it's fine. If you want to, like, we have some extra fruit, go ahead. But like, in general, it's like, there is random community members who will let them know. You don't need to be rude to them, but we can just clarify and be honest, right? Sometimes there's the flip side, which is a little bit more of an antagonistic situation, right? So this one, way less often that it happens, but it is sometimes a more stressful situation, right? So sometimes you have someone like that isn't just curious or isn't just confused, but is actually like poking in. We've had situations where like this, again, teacher, professor, I don't know. She's a little vague about it, but she's some professor who just like keeps coming by. Now, if you want to spend some time in the area, like, sure, but keeps coming by and taking food before students get food, taking food before like community members get food, taking a lot of it. And it's like, we're not here to police eating, but again, remembering who we're trying to serve here. And so that's a bit more like not so much well-intentioned, but she actually, it's a little bit of an entitlement thing. And so again, this is where it repeats, like it's sort of the same attitude, but you can be a little firmer, right? And so you're not trying to, you want to keep an eye on your body language, you want to keep an eye on your communication style, but what I would say as interns, let Jean know. If Jean needs to be the one to handle it, that's fine. Sometimes realistically and unfortunately, there are the usual power dynamics, right? So students, a lot of times adults don't listen. I mean, y'all are all adults, we're all adults, but like a lot of times older folks are disrespectful of that and see a power dynamic, and so they don't see that they have to listen to y'all. Hopefully wearing the 580 shirt kind of gives a little bit of a legitimacy to that, but it can happen. Sometimes you need to just tell Jean, even if you could like handle it in general, sometimes they just need to hear from someone who looks authoritative to be like, hey, give some space. But aside from that, you are welcome to like engage the person, again, hear them out where they're at, in cases like this where they're just like taking food, you can just hash it out and reaffirm the boundaries of the space and clarify with them. So that's a type of like external, not well-intentioned situation, but it is able to be de-escalated. And then, unfortunately, like when that person comes by, we have to just a little bit be firm with them in that kind of situation to be like, hey, this is prioritizing this. Even rarer situation are some that are full-on aggressive. So we had an instance where someone a couple times came by, starts yelling at people, starts being real aggressive, starts, okay, I don't want to scare you. In this case, this person had a knife, but that's like the rarest of the rare situation. But in general, they were like aggressive, like not well intentioned, definitely causing problems. And at this point, you have to be real and assess that they are putting the safety of people in the cafe at risk, right? So if you are not someone who would be safe inserting yourself in this situation, don't. Just don't be a hero. Like, just don't, right? Don't do that. But your goal in this situation, first have this the same. Assess positionality, keep an eye on your body language. If this person's being aggressive, still keep an eye on your body language, still keep an eye on your communication style, right? Because even though they're up here, you need to be down here if you can be. You can feel stress, you can let yourself feel stress, but it's about how are you gonna try and mediate that stress. Whether that's remove yourself entirely, whether that's go get Jean, whether that's go tell someone else more immediately available who is feeling more comfortable engaging, that's fine. If you feel ready to engage, that's fine too, but you unfortunately have to kind of keep your communication still in check, right? And your goal at this point is one way or another, redirect that person away from the cafe, right? Whether that's just straight up these sound silly, but start a different conversation, right? Move them away from that mindset of whatever they're upset about. After you hear them out, right, you can assess the situation. Hear out, well, what are they upset about? Is it something specific, or are they just mad? Are they just unfortunately causing trouble, right? Try to redirect the conversation. Sometimes you have to try and cool them down a bit, maybe distract them, maybe talk them into just moving away from the space, whatever it is. The last step is, again, sometimes you just have to be firm. Not aggressive, but sometimes you have to be hey, we're gonna have to ask you to step out from the space. I'm sorry, it's just not time. You can cool off, but you gotta be a little firm about it, right? And these situations, I'm just gonna be honest, there's not gonna be a clear-cut set of rules of if this, do this. It's really about feeling the situation out. But what I will say is there are ways to be firm without being aggressive, and these are times when you need to do that. If there's someone who's coming aggressive, but your main goal always is cool them down and just get them to move away from the community space if they're putting people's safety at risk, right? In this particular situation, there was a need to put distance between this person and a particular member of the community because they were being specifically aggressive towards that person. So again, are you the person who feels comfortable putting yourself in between someone else? If not, get someone else. If you don't need to put yourself in between something, don't do that either, right? It's really just what is the minimum necessary steps to follow, right? And then afterwards, after a situation like this, there's always a follow-up. So these are all the de-escalation tactics. I'll talk about the follow-up in a second, but these are the range of situations, right? So external people, non-antagonistic, meanwhile, just tell them what's going on. They're just curious. It's fine. It's fine for them to be curious. If they're, just wondering what's up. Kind of, not aggressive, but non-well-intentioned person. Similar, tell them what's up. Be a little firmer. You can tell them that they need to step back from the space. And then the last one is aggressive person, full on. And that's where you really, that's where your job is, just get them away from the space. Yeah.
And if you can't get them away from the space, if they're outside, shut the door, the big door, and shut it down. That's literally shuts it down fast.
Yeah. Just whatever you can is separation. Separation is the biggest de-escalation tool, right? Separate whoever is causing the conflict from the rest of the group, right? Again, though, that doesn't mean physically. Don't push them. Don't beef up. Don't look tough like that. Just be firm. Yeah, and so really separate. In terms of situations where either intentionally or unintentionally it's been like high stress, if you have the mental capacity to do so, definitely like follow up with whoever had to be involved. If there was like a large group of people, just be like, hey, how's everyone feeling? You know, like everyone okay? And then, you know, like check in on people genuinely and just like hear out if anyone's stressed. You might not be stressed, someone might not be stressed, but you don't know how people are going to be affected. And if we're really thinking seriously about building community space, you know, you can't control everything that happens, but you can control how you follow up. So that's a big step. And again, if you're not feeling mentally ready to do that, even if it's not like super serious, if you're just not feeling it, always get someone who can. So a lot of the steps are the same, right? And that's why I keep repeating them. The reason I keep repeating them is that you can't always follow a strict set of rules, but what's helpful is being mentally prepared so that it becomes pretty intuitive when you hit a situation, because like invariably if there's conflict, you're gonna kind of like potentially get a little frazzled, and you don't want to be frazzled if people are already kind of feeling a little frazzled and stressed, right? So you really want it to become a little intuitive. So you don't have to sit there. I keep saying these steps, but it's not so you sit there and you're like, all right, step one, did I do that checklist? Okay, now I'm good. Just start to build it into like intuitively how you want to engage with people, right? Open body language, try and stay calm. Don't be dismissive of people, even if they're fucking like rambling at you about shit that don't make sense. Like, don't be dismissive, because it's felt like just like you would feel it if someone was like, yeah, dude, like whatever, you know, like don't do that. And I know it's almost straightforward, but that's the whole point, right? There's not some secret trick. It's just hear them out, separate, try and pull them off, and that's it. So that's kind of the rundown for the bulk of like the sort of external interactions. How are people feeling so far? Does all like kind of make sense? Check it out. Cool. So before I close, the second one is intercommunity. In some ways, this is easier because it rarely is fully antagonistic in that way. It's almost always well-meaning, but it's just the reality of being in a community space. People have disagreements, like I said. But in some ways, it can be harder, because if you've been building community, these are your friends, these are each other's friends, and you know, it can kind of feel like the whole thing, right? But in some ways, a lot of the principles are really the same. You know, right? Like about how you assess yourself, how you speak to people, how you encourage them, right? But in some ways, the difference comes from that personal relationship. So depending on the situation, like you're not in any of these cases someone's emotional mediator, right? You want to help de-escalate a situation. You don't need to solve every single problem that comes up. Like you don't need to like couples counsel people, you don't need to like lecture at people, you don't need to like teach them what's up. Okay? You're there to help resolve conflict, but kind of you can think of it like we're a community space. So also the expectations can be set, right? Like we can establish the boundaries of like, hey guys, like we as a community need to like be respectful. And so because they're inside the community, they almost have a different level of agreement, because we're on the same page about mutual respect for each other, right? And so you know, people are allowed to have different opinions, different ideas. People are allowed to talk it out. This space is not one where you have to like hide things, right? But what you can do if things are getting heated, first of all, try not to like butt in, but like you can step in and like kind of help reground people a little bit, right? In a respectful way, remind them of the kind of principles of the space, right? Oftentimes that's all that's needed. Like sometimes people get like we had a situation like it wasn't even an argument. People just started like yelling, and like no one was arguing. Everyone was just like, and I was like just talking about like a coup, and you know it's like it's serious politics. And then people were like really talking, and you're like, hey, like what's up? Because people were coming in, hearing yelling, and being like, like I don't know what's up. So there's no even like argument happening. So you can just remind people like, hey, y'all are like allowed to talk it out, but it's getting a little heated, and it's kind of making some people uncomfortable. And kind of just reground, and like half the time they're just like, oh fuck, like I didn't realize I was yelling. That's my bad, right? Because they're inside the community, right? Sometimes, realistically, we've had people actually have arguments, actually have disagreements. Sometimes you just gotta let them play it out, but you can encourage them to maybe take some space, either away from each other if it needs to be that, or go have that conversation you need to have, but maybe outside of the main cafe area. That's okay.
If people need to have that conversation, they need to have that conversation. If it needs to get emotional, it needs to get emotional. You don't need to tell them to stop, but you can, again, reground and just be like, hey, I think you guys maybe want to have it in a private space, so you can hash it out if you need to. And then the last one, again, is the kind of full-on antagonistic one. Those are very rare, but every once in a while we'll have folks still within the community, but maybe coming in with a bad attitude, maybe coming in being a little disrespectful. Maybe it's just one day, maybe they just had a bad day and they came in and they were really rude to someone. You can talk to them, hear them out, right? You can even understand where it's coming from without saying that it's okay that they did that. And you can validate people's reasons for feeling the way that they did, reasons for acting the way that they did, in some cases without saying that it's okay, right? If I come in and I yell at Gene, and then someone pulls me back, it's like, hey, like, is everything okay? Like, I usually like that. Kind of hurt Gene's feelings, like, what's up? Maybe they'll just be like, I just had a fucking stressful day, like, my work is crazy and I had classes. You can kind of understand that that's real, right? They're stressed, but then remind them that, like, that wasn't so great the way that they ended up taking it out on Gene, and like, and depending on the situation, you maybe encourage them to like apologize or encourage that situation. Also talk to Gene in that case, right? And be like, don't go speak on Gene's behalf, right? Don't have a whole thing. And if Gene's like, nah, like we're tight and I didn't like it, but I'll handle it, you can also let that, right? So you're not here to go problem solve behind the scenes, everyone, right? We can engage the community, be respectful, but you can still kind of cool that situation down and help sort of reaffirm the principles of the space. And once again, if it comes to it, at the end of the day, if you need to be firm about something, be firm about something, right? And they're like, yo, I fucking hate Gene. Like I don't want to see Gene around the cafe anymore. Like, can you kick Gene out? No, we can't kick Gene out. Gene didn't do anything in that case. Like, even if you guys beef, even people like beef outside of the space, like this space is not here to be like, this is Nyusha's space and not Gene's space, or this is Gene's space and not Nyusha's space. So you can kind of be like, no, I'm not going to kick Gene out, but if you don't want to be in the space at the same time as Gene, you guys can choose when to come or not come. If it elevates to a higher level of conflict, right, and it's like there's actual thing, you can invite people to like hash it out together. You can, again, raise it to Gene, not the real Gene, not the Gene in the scenario.
And I will kick him. I already told you, I had banned only 3, so.
Yeah. And then in rare situations, very rare situations, it really elevates where we do have to preserve the like integrity of the space, right? This needs to be welcoming. If someone is consistently coming in, making other people unsafe, making other people uncomfortable, right? That's no longer just conflict, right? That's like someone is harming the space. And in those rare situations, that was only 2, 3. You guys don't have to do this, but they will be asked. And,
that is not your job ever.
Yeah, so.
Your job in that situation is to say that this is a consistent threat that you see or perceive.
Yeah, and then that's So yeah, some of that maybe was like, I know it's not as many like concrete steps, but that's kind of how the general principle of how you want to handle these different types of situations. And most importantly, just don't get caught up in the nitty gritty, right? Focus on the objective is to create a healthy community space. And you're not the only one who has to solve everything. You just want to be ready if something comes up so you can react appropriately and call for help appropriately and call on the people in the community who aren't interns when needed to like, so,
questions? A couple things I just want to add is this also speaks to how you talk to other interns. So again, if there's an issue that you're having with the person you're working with or somebody that you see is perhaps stepping outside of some of the principles, have a conversation with them first. You say, look, what's going on? You seem really uptight. Is everything all right? You know, check in with them. If it's really something that you don't know how to handle, that's why Corelli and I are here. Just to be clear that that's, work it out amongst yourself as best you can, but stay calm. Think about, everybody's here hopefully to create the best community for all of us. And if you have an issue, talk to somebody. Don't let it fester and this person never comes up and and then go a quarter and you're kicked off with somebody, they don't even know that there's a problem. So that goes back to what we talked to this morning about listen. you know, talk about what you might need or what's happening with you. So communicate, I'm gonna be 5 minutes late, this is happening. If it becomes an ongoing problem, that's again where Carly and I will step in and talk directly to an intern. This is now that level up, so that you don't have to be the one saying, I don't want to do this anymore because I don't feel respected, or I feel like I'm being taken advantage of by my coworker. I just need to air myself, and it's okay to bring that to us because we know that, we understand that. So really, it's just a matter of setting the tone for yourself. How would you want to be treated? And knowing not to feed into somebody else's aggression or demands or expectations, entitlements. And I'm not sure where A is, so that would be, we'll go into that in a minute. But, you know, if it's somebody from the outside of the church, I will give you the information of this is what you say. It's a student space for students, the food is for students, you know, appreciate your interest, but I can't give you food, I can't do anything. If you need the church, here's the phone number, or, you know, send them out to the front where there's the signpost. The secretary isn't in, or the office manager isn't in right now. You'll have to call back or send them an email. I mean, you don't have to answer anybody's questions.
If you don't know, also, you can just be like, oh, no, I don't really know that.
Yeah, and there might be somebody there in the room who does actually know, you know, as you get familiar with who you could talk to. And one of the things A is going to share with you, she will give you her number if anything really egregious happens. She also wants to be told because it's their understanding of the liability of the building. They just want to be told. I don't know if you need to go to her directly because my preference is you go to Crowley and I, you tell us if a church member is acting up specifically, that's what I'm going to call out. Because they know me and they know I will. I feel, again, that's my role. I can go as someone in and say, look, you don't talk to students like this. And sometimes they don't actually even realize what they're saying or how they're saying it because they're here to do something and they're frustrated because they can't get in. That's not our problem. And we are also, it's made very clear to me now that we are not to let anyone in the building that we don't know. So you don't know the congregation numbers, you don't let them in. And you just say, I'm sorry. Our role is we can't open the door for anybody. We don't have keys to any part of the church except our space. End of discussion. And if they get nasty, shut the door. and again, usually it's right, be firm. Just say, you know, look, this is a student space, it's for students only. You know, we can't help you with that. I can give you water, but I'm going to ask you to leave because the space is for students. End of discussion. Any questions that you might have for Nyusha? If you want to shut that off, and I will see if A has texted